Chapter 589. Conclusion of the Volume 2. It's the same old routine. Let's summarize this volume briefly. Friends who don't want to read my ramblings can skip ahead. I initially thought this volume wouldn't be very long, at least not exceeding the 550,000 words of the first volume, but as I wrote, I realized I had unknowingly reached nearly 700,000 words. It's a bit lengthy, but it's not filler. Well, at least I don't think it's filler. Every plot point or dialogue has its significance, intricately connected. Can that be called filler? Doghead. Many things I wanted to say were already mentioned in the summary at the end of the first volume, so I'll skip that and move directly to the summary section. The theme of the first volume is deities. Seraphim, Yangjian, the little black dog, the primordial heavenly venerable, Poseidon, Hades, Loki. This is the beginning of everything, a story of gods protecting humans. The second volume, however, is different. The core of this volume is no longer those gods who can summon the wind and rain, but rather one ordinary yet great human after another. The sickly recluse Wu Laogo, the solitary guardian of the border Li Diang, the naive Chen Han, the reborn by Li Pangpang in despair, the only night watchman in Guangzhou and Shenzhen, Miao Su, the undercover believer in the ninth seat, and those human sealings, who says this world needs gods. In despair and darkness, those who bravely stand before thousands radiate a brilliance more dazzling than that of deities. In this volume, what Sanjiu truly wants to write can be summed up in 4 words, which are Yi Fan's long-cherished wish. Humans can conquer heaven. I wonder if any readers have noticed that the 5 human sealings are all ordinary representations. Waiter Zhou Ping, delivery guy Lu Wei, security guard Yi Fan, programmer Guan Zai, teacher Qin Fuzi. Their professions are commonplace in life, but that doesn't mean they are insignificant. Every person cloaked in ordinariness may hide a heart as pure as crystal. When a crisis arises, true heroes come from the ordinary, not from the noble or wealthy. Perhaps they are not superheroes, not Iron Man, they can't save the earth and there are few things they can do, but so what? Saving a despondent person contemplating suicide, rescuing a passerby who accidentally fell into a river, scaring off a stalker following a girl, saving a child abducted by traffickers. Compared to saving the world, these actions may seem small, but to those who are saved, they are heroes. Each of us is Chen Han. Without Li Diang's background, without Zhou Ping's talent, ordinary yet great, that is the true night watchman. This is what I wanted to convey in this volume. There may be many areas that aren't handled perfectly, but overall, Sanjiu is still satisfied. Sanjiu is still a newcomer in the web literature scene. From writing the first book to now, it's only been a year. There will definitely be issues and there is still a considerable gap compared to some established masters, but Sanjiu will continue to improve and write better. As for the next volume, no spoilers. Still, if everyone thinks Sanjiu's writing is decent and this book is enjoyable, it would be great if you could help promote it. Here I especially want to thank those loyal readers who have always supported me and turned into enthusiastic promoters. Each and every one of you can pin down socially anxious Zhou Ping. Well done. Lastly, I want to remind you all not to hoard books. Sending love. Chapter 590. Prayer for Death. Under the azure sky, the surging waves crashed against the deep black rocks, splashing up white foam. The roaring sound of the waves echoed like thunder against the sheer cliffs. This was a secluded narrow road winding around the Green Mountains, about 80 meters above the sea below. Stepping over the low guardrail beside the road and taking a few steps forward, one could stand on the edge of the cliff and see the distant deep blue sea. At this moment, on the edge of the cliff stood a little girl dressed in a tattered kimono. One of her feet was in a broken wooden sandal, while the other shoe was nowhere to be found. Her greasy black hair was styled into a bun, held up by a light pink cherry blossom hairpin, with stray strands fluttering in the wind. The girl was only about 12 or 13 years old, small and delicate. Her tear-streaked face gazed out at the vast sea, her small hands tightly gripping the hem of her kimono, her lips pressed together, filled with unspeakable sadness and grievance. After a long while, she took out a flip phone with a yellowed Pikachu sticker on it. She dialed a number. "Hello," she spoke timidly. "This is the Yokohama City Police Department. How can we assist you? Can you help collect a body?" "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Collect a body." The little girl glanced at the turbulent waves below, 5 minutes from now at the cliff by Makiyama Line. Can you come help me collect a body? There was a pause on the other end, followed by the faint sound of a keyboard being tapped, as if searching for something. At the same time, a small string of white numbers lit up on the girl's shoulder. The voice on the other end became serious. You are Yuzuki Rina, a fourth-generation citizen, ID number 428574494, correct? Do you know that suicide is an unforgivable act of blasphemy? Please abandon the thought of taking your life. A patrol officer will be dispatched shortly. Beep. Rina hung up the phone. Her arm holding the phone slowly dropped, her lips tightly pressed together as she murmured, "If you won't help me collect the body, then don't." She tossed the phone aside and stepped forward, walking against the sea breeze toward the edge of the cliff. On her black kimono, a few falling cherry blossoms danced wildly in the wind. She stood at the cliff's edge just a step away from falling. Below, the surging waves concealed sharp rocks. If she jumped from here, she would be shattered in an instant. It shouldn't hurt too much, right? She remained silent for a long time, extending her hands and forming a prayer gesture in front of her chest. Kind and powerful deity Daikokuten, this is my last prayer to you. You are the god of war from the other shore, the nemesis of all evil, bringing peace and happiness to the world, dispelling all misfortune and ominous signs. Please forgive my sin of wanting to end my life, grant me liberation and hope. May your blessings shine upon the earth. She gently released her hands, her gaze falling on the vast sea below. Taking a deep breath, she was about to leap. Suddenly, her body froze in place. She rubbed her reddened eyes and looked at the sea not far away, her small face showing a look of shock. She saw a black figure floating on the surface of the sea below the cliff, drifting like a piece of driftwood, resembling a corpse. Strangely, no matter how the waves crashed against it, it remained still like a wax figure, not even moving its arms. A dead person? Rina blinked hard, trying to see the situation more clearly, but before she could look again, the floating body had already drifted into the rocky area beneath her, wedged at the bottom of the cliff. Rina felt a surge of anger. Why did that corpse have to float to the exact spot where she was about to jump? What if she jumped and collided with that body, not dying instantly? That would hurt so much. And even if she died, she would probably get stuck there, entangled with that unfamiliar male corpse among the rocks. No, absolutely not. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She stomped her foot in frustration, tears welling up in her eyes again. Why was she so unlucky? After finally gathering the courage to jump into the sea to end her life, she chose what seemed to be the most dignified spot, only to have someone else beat her to it. This place could not be given up so easily. Determined, Rina threw the broken wooden sandal into the sea and ran to a relatively gentle slope on the other side of the road, barefoot, cautiously making her way toward the water below. She walked into the cold seawater along the rocky shore, gritting her teeth as she swam toward the black figure stuck among the rocks. The figure was getting closer. She finally reached the rocky area, grabbed the collar of the black-clad man and pulled hard. The corpse slid down from the rocks. Splash! A wave crashed over them, sweeping the petite Rina and the man back onto the rocky shore. During the tumult, Rina was knocked into the water, swallowing a lot of seawater. Although she could swim, her skills were not great. After all, according to local regulations, all residents were prohibited from entering the sea. Swimming, boating, fishing, or flying were absolutely forbidden. She had learned to swim as a child in a small creek near her home in Osaka. After being washed up on the rocky shore, she struggled to get up, her kimono completely soaked, and she collapsed on the ground, coughing violently. Once she coughed out all the water from her lungs, she took a long breath, swayed as she stood up, and walked over to the corpse that had washed up beside her. Only then did she have time to carefully observe the person. Quickly, her brows furrowed. This was a young man who looked to be around 20, quite handsome. Strangely, despite having drifted in the sea for so long, he was completely dry, not a drop of water on him, and his hair was dry as well. His eyes were open, staring at something as if deep in thought yet somewhat alert. It was as if his time had been paused. A strange corpse, Rina muttered. She stood up, preparing to return to her place and continue her plan to end her life. She had just called the police and they seemed to have tracked her location through her ID code, dispatching officers to this area. If she couldn't take her life before they caught her, she would likely be thrown into jail, never to come out again, let alone commit suicide in prison. Here suicide was a serious crime. Just as she stood up, she saw the corpse lying on the ground. Its eyes seemed to blink. She froze, rubbed her eyes and looked back again. In the next moment the black-clad man's corpse suddenly sat up, his eyes filled with horror, gasping heavily. Chapter 591. The Resurrected Nation. Lin Chia looked around, his eyes filled with confusion. He didn't know what had happened. His memories were still stuck at the moment outside the borders of the Great Xia, in the mist, facing that white-haired old man. He remembered that the man had placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, and then it was as if he had been frozen in ice, his body and mind both coming to a standstill. By the time he woke up he had already arrived here. Where is this? Where are the others? His gaze swept around. It was an ordinary gravel beach, and apart from a strangely dressed little girl with a terrified expression, he saw no one else. The other team members were not nearby. Ultimately, Lin Chia's gaze fell on the terrified little girl. He suddenly felt that the girl's outfit seemed somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it in a book. It seemed to be mentioned in a course during training camp. The little girl cautiously sized up Lin Chia for a moment and tentatively asked, "So you're not dead?" Lin Chia fell into deep bewilderment after hearing her mumble a sentence. He couldn't understand. But at that moment he finally remembered where he had seen these things before. During training camp, there was a specific course that discussed the cultural differences of various countries before the mist descended, leading into many different regional myths and legends. He knew which countries existed in the world before the mist descended and had a general understanding of their cultural differences, but all of this was theoretical knowledge. He had never seen it with his own eyes, so he couldn't recall it all at once. However, now he could basically confirm where this place was. Cherry blossoms, kimonos, language. Is this Japan? Lin Chia stood in place for a long time looking around again. The low gravel beach was beside towering cliffs, and on the cliffs was a narrow road, where he could vaguely hear the hum of vehicles passing by. The distant sky was a clear blue, and the waves rolled in from the edge of his vision, pure and white, while the clouds drifted lazily across the sky as if painted. How is this possible? Japan was supposed to have been swallowed by the mist long ago. Lin Chia clearly remembered that during training camp, the instructor had already said that Japan was now completely shrouded in mist, with no survivors at all. The former Blue Rain team had also brought back news of Japan's destruction after chasing the Yamata no Orochi into the mist. This should have been a dead city enveloped in mist, the entrance to Takamagara, the land of the gods in Japan. But now where was there any sign of a dead city? He looked out, and even at the edge of the sea he couldn't find any trace of the mist. It was as if the mist had completely vanished from this planet. Lin Chia stood there like a statue, staring blankly at the distant sea. Yuzuriha blinked, seeing that Lin Chia didn't answer her question, and spoke again. "I'm talking to you, why are you still dazed?" Lin Chia came back to his senses and looked at the girl in the black cherry blossom kimono. After hesitating for a moment, he revealed a polite smile. He didn't understand what the other person was saying, nor did he know what was going on in this country. It was better not to reveal his identity as an outsider for now. Seeing Lin Chia smiling inexplicably at her, Yuzuriha's expression became even stranger, and she continued to ask in Japanese. "What generation are you? Where do you live? What's your number?" Lin Chia smiled without speaking. Yuzuriha asked suspiciously, "You can't be mute, right? Or are you deaf?" Lin Chia smiled even brighter. It seemed he was deaf. Yuzuriha was certain of her thoughts. If he were mute, even if he couldn't speak, he should be able to gesture or at least show his number, but he had no reaction to what she said. There was something wrong with his ears. Thinking of this, Yuzuriha looked at Lin Chia with a hint of pity. Lin Chia didn't know what the little girl was thinking, but he felt that her expression was somewhat off. However, apart from continuing to smile, he seemed to be unable to do anything else. Yuzuriha reached out her hand, about to gesture something, when a harsh siren suddenly blared from the road above. A police car stopped by the roadside, and soon two men's voices sounded from above. "This should be the place where that girl called from. Let's split up and see if she's still here. It's been so long. If she wanted to commit suicide, it must be over by now, right? Suicide is a serious crime, and she chose to do it by the sea, breaking the ban on the sea, which adds to her crime. If she's still alive, we'll detain her directly for life imprisonment. If she's already dead, we'll have to recover her body. Got it, I'll go look below first. Hearing this conversation, Yuzuriha's face suddenly turned ugly, her eyes filled with anxiety. She certainly knew that suicide was a serious crime, but she still chose to call the police, wanting to use their words to announce her death and achieve some purpose. But she hadn't expected that now the police had arrived and she hadn't succeeded in dying. Now that she was on the beach, it was definitely impossible to jump into the sea to end her life. Even if she wanted to dive into the water to drown, those two police officers would quickly pull her back. Once she was locked up in prison, it would truly be a case of wanting to live but being unable to, wanting to die but being unable to. Yuzuriha's mind raced, quickly making a choice. She pressed her body against the visual blind spot beneath the cliff and moved along the coastline to the other side. Just then, as if she thought of something, she turned back and grabbed Lin Chia's arm, seriously saying to him, "Follow me next and don't make a sound." Although she didn't know who Lin Chia was, since he was also floating in the sea, he was likely in the same situation as her, a failed suicide attempt. Even if he hadn't attempted suicide, entering the sea without permission also broke the ban and he couldn't escape punishment. Moreover, he was deaf and couldn't hear that the two police officers had already begun searching here. If she left him here, he would only end up being caught. After all, escaping alone was the same as escaping with him. It was just a matter of convenience. Lin Chia couldn't understand what Yuzuriha was saying, but it seemed she had no ill intentions, so he nodded and followed her. Yuzuriha led Lin Chia along the coastline, skillfully walking for a while until they reached a steep slope. Barefoot, she nimbly climbed up. Once she quickly reached the other side of the road, she realized that Lin Chia might not be able to climb such a steep slope as easily as she did. Just as she was about to turn back to check, a figure in black landed lightly beside her like a ghost. Chapter 592, Grandma Crane. Yuri Rina was a bit dazed. She hadn't heard Lin Chia climbing up the steep slope at all, not even realizing when he had come up from below. He was like a black ghost suddenly flying up from the steep slope. "Your skills are quite impressive," Yuri Rina remarked in Japanese. Lin Chia smiled but said nothing. The two walked along the road on the sheer cliff under the azure sky, one in front of the other, heading toward the other side of the road. Yuri Rina walked ahead, barefoot, her soles leaving faint watermarks on the gray asphalt. The old black sakura kimono she wore seemed a bit loose, not quite her size, and the sleeves were even slightly torn, stitched together with gray threads. With each step she took, the light pink hairpins stuck in her bun of black hair would gently sway, reflecting a glimmering light. Lin Chia, clad in a black trench coat, walked calmly behind her. In his mind he quickly sorted through all the known information. The root of everything was that white-haired old man, suspected to be Wang Mian, who had stepped onto a small boat in the mist. He wore a mask of Wang Mian, draped in the cloak of the mask team, and carried the yuan at his waist. His abilities were also related to time, and Lin Chia could almost confirm that this person was indeed Wang Mian. But the contradiction lay in the fact that Wang Mian wasn't that old, and he was far from having reached the divine realm. Could it be that he came from the future? The moment this thought appeared in Lin Chia's mind, it was immediately tagged as highly likely. Wang Mian's ability to time travel was no secret. Instructor Yuan Gang had mentioned Wang Mian's achievements while explaining the Night Watchman's medals. 5 years ago, when the Yamata no Orochi landed in the East China Sea, Wang Mian had consumed his lifespan to travel back in time, returning 1 hour before the appearance of the Yamata no Orochi to save the entire city's inhabitants. At that time, Wang Mian was still just a newcomer in the Wuliang realm. If the future Wang Mian truly broke through that ceiling and stepped into the divine realm, it wouldn't be impossible for him to travel back in time from far in the future. Now the question was, if this speculation was correct, from which point in the future had he traveled back and what was his purpose in returning? Was it just to bring him to this place? What about the other team members? Were they here too? Was this really Japan? Countless doubts surged in Lin Chia's mind, and the more he thought, the more chaotic it became. Suddenly he thought of another possibility. If Wang Mian could manipulate time, was it possible that he had sent everyone back to Japan 100 years ago before the mist had appeared? Lin Chia abruptly raised his head and looked around. At this moment the two had already left the road and arrived at the city streets. They were still not at the city center. There were few pedestrians on the road. The gray asphalt was marked with clean white lines indicating lanes. On the right was a newly opened sea urchin rice bowl shop, while on the left was an electronics store that had already closed down. Next to the lane were several locked bicycles, and further ahead was a black sedan. Lin Chia didn't recognize the car brand, but from its shape, it didn't look like a product from decades ago. Yuri Rina, walking in front of him, suddenly stopped. She waited until the traffic light above turned green before continuing forward. This was definitely not Japan from 100 years ago. This was a modern city. Lin Chia dismissed the thought of traveling back in time and continued to ponder the essence of this place. Since there was no time travel, how had this country, devoid of mist, come into existence? This country shouldn't exist, yet here he was, and he could vaguely sense that beneath this tranquil and beautiful exterior, there must be some hidden, dangerous secret. Unable to make sense of it all for now, Lin Chia had to set it aside temporarily and focus on the immediate problem at hand. A strange environment, an unfamiliar language, an alien culture. The first issue Lin Chia needed to resolve was the language barrier. Not speaking and not understanding the characters made it difficult to grasp the situation here. But language wasn't something that could be learned in just a day or two. Just as Lin Chia was feeling frustrated, the two had reached the edge of the city. The surrounding buildings gradually became shorter and sparser, and finally, they stopped in front of a desolate patch of land behind a park. There were no habitable houses here, not even any lights illuminating the area. At the edge of this vacant lot, a few seemingly long-abandoned shipping containers were haphazardly placed. Yuri Rina turned to Lin Chia and said in Japanese, "Follow me and don't make a sound." After saying that, she made a times gesture in front of her mouth with her finger. Lin Chia immediately understood her meaning and nodded. The two quietly approached one of the containers. Yuri Rina cautiously looked around to ensure there was no one else before unlocking the container door and quickly stepping inside. Inside the container was a small living space. A worn-out thick mattress whose origin was unknown was piled with two thin blankets. Next to it was a simple clothes rack made from bent pipes, hanging two pieces of clothing along with some basic toiletries. On the other side of the mattress was a wooden chair, where an elderly woman with graying hair was sitting, squinting her eyes, her wrinkled hands trembling as she folded white paper. Though her speed was slow, her technique was very skilled, and within seconds she folded a delicate origami crane, gently placing it at her feet. At her feet, a small mountain of origami cranes had already piled up, completely covering her shoes. Hearing the container door being pushed open, she slowly looked up, and upon seeing the petite figure, a radiant smile appeared on her aged face. "Little Yuri, you're back?" "I'm back," Yuri Rina replied with a smile on her small face. "Granny Crane, I brought a guest with me." "A guest?" Upon hearing this, the old woman's gaze fell behind Yuri Rina, spotting the man in the black trench coat. She gently set down the white paper in her hands, placed her hands on the armrests of the chair, and with great effort tried to stand up. Her legs trembled slightly as they touched the ground. "A guest has come. Quick, quick, sit down, I'll make a cup of tea for the guest." "Granny Crane, please sit down. Let me take care of the guest." Yuri Rina hurriedly supported her, helping her back into the chair while speaking. Granny Crane opened her mouth, seemingly wanting to say something more, but her body was indeed too weak, and she could only lean back into the chair with Yuri Rina's assistance. Yuri Rina turned back and saw Lin Chia still standing at the door, her brows slightly furrowed. "What are you still standing there for? Come in and close the door. We can't let others see us here." Chapter 593. Praise of the God of Magic. Lin Chia saw Yuzina pointing at the door and roughly understood his intention, reaching out to close the container door. The container had no windows, and as soon as the door was shut, the entire space was plunged into darkness. Just then a small light flickered on, illuminating part of the container. Next to Yuzina, a small light bulb was connected to a nearby battery pack, emitting a warm glow that formed a halo. Lin Chia stood at the door, somewhat surprised. From her clothing he could tell that the girl's family background was not very good, but he never expected that she had no place to live and had to stay in this old container with an elderly woman. A cool breeze seeped through the gaps in the container, causing the old woman sitting on a wooden chair to shiver. Yuzina immediately picked up a blanket from the mattress and gently covered her. "Grandmatsuru, are you cold?" she asked softly. Grandmatsuru smiled. "It's fine, I'm not cold. You go attend to your guest. After covering the blanket, Yuzina nodded and turned to Lin Chia, seemingly wanting to say something. After hesitating for a moment, she walked to the corner of the container and pulled out a pen and a piece of paper from a pile of cardboard boxes. Seeing this, Lin Chia's eyelids twitched. He had already vaguely guessed what the girl was trying to do. But even if she wrote something on the paper, he wouldn't understand it. He could still pretend to be deaf, but when she showed him what she wrote, he couldn't pretend to be a fool, could he? Lin Chia's mind raced. He had considered leaving to avoid exposing his identity as an outsider, but he wasn't very familiar with the way of life, laws, and common sense here. Walking outside alone might cause unnecessary trouble. Given the current situation, it was safer to stay here. At that moment, Lin Chia seemed to think of something and immediately sank his consciousness into the Divine Mental Hospital in his mind. Divine Mental Hospital. Belai. Wearing a white coat, Lin Chia walked briskly through the hospital, searching for the pug's whereabouts. He called out a couple of times but no one responded. After pondering for a moment, he changed his call. Let's go catch jellyfish, SpongeBob. Whoosh. A yellow blur suddenly leaped down from the rooftop. The pug stood on its hind legs, its front paws on its hips, wearing an elegant tailcoat, excitedly barking twice. Great. Let's go catch jellyfish. Lin Chia's mouth twitched. He reached out to pat the pug's head and said, First spit out Balai. The pug opened its mouth and spat onto the ground. A small golden bug mixed with its saliva was ejected, wearing a look of despair. Lin Chia's face showed disgust as he waved his hand to summon a stream of water to wash it away, then picked it up and asked, Do you have a quick way to master the language in the mist? Lin Chia clearly remembered that before arriving in Daxia, Balai was a mysterious entity born from the London mist, having self-taught English and Chinese before coming here. Perhaps it could help him quickly master Japanese as well. Learning a language? That's easy, Balai said, sounding dazed. Just watch, listen, and practice more. I need to master it in 5 seconds. Are you awake or am I not awake? Lin Chia silently stuffed Balai back into the pug's mouth and sighed deeply. It seemed that Balai had no quick solution either. He would still have to learn bit by bit, but he didn't have that much time. Learning a language was never something that could be done overnight, unless one could transcend the language barrier like a deity and communicate directly through divine thought. Otherwise, one could only learn step by step. Balai struggled to crawl out of the pug's mouth. If you think you're not smart enough, I can go learn it first and then come back to teach you. Lin Chia. Once again, Lin Chia stuffed Balai back into the pug's mouth, patted the pug's head and smiled, saying, Good boy, go eat some jellyfish in the bathroom, go ahead. Woof. The pug excitedly stood up, sprinting towards the corner bathroom, and faintly, one could hear Balai's desperate whimpering from its mouth. Lin Chia patted his white coat and sighed again. Your Excellency, it seems you've encountered a problem. Merlin, wearing a large hat, slowly walked over from the other end of the corridor, holding a bowl of sesame paste, smiling as he spoke. Lord Merlin, Lin Chia replied politely, I have indeed encountered a problem. Lin Chia explained his current issue, and Merlin raised his eyebrows slightly, a smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. Quickly mastering a language? Is that really so difficult? I don't have much time. 2 seconds is enough. Merlin said leisurely. Language mastery is merely an entry-level magic of the causality system. It allows consciousness to transcend the spirit itself and express in another form. Different people will automatically translate it into different languages upon hearing it. As long as you are given this magic, you will essentially master all the languages in the world. Lin Chia's eyes lit up. Right now I'm just in a spiritual state. Can I accept this magic? Of course, this magic is specifically cast on the soul itself. Then I'll leave it to you, Lord Merlin. Lin Chia smiled as he spoke. What is the difference? Look at Balai, then look at Merlin. Deities truly have their own strengths. Fortunately, you met me. If it were any other deity, they wouldn't be able to help you with this. Merlin slowly raised his magic wand, the tip glowing faintly, and gently tapped Lin Chia's forehead. As I said, magic may not be the most powerful force, but it is the most practical. The faint light surged from the tip of Merlin's wand into Lin Chia's mind. In that instant, Lin Chia felt as if something in his mind had been shattered, an unprecedented clarity washing over him. Causality system low-level magic. Language mastery. The faint light lasted only 2 seconds. When Lin Chia opened his eyes again, this magic had deeply rooted itself in his soul. Language was no longer a challenge for him. Now, if he returned to school for an exam, he could score full marks in language even with his eyes closed. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly as he looked at Merlin and sincerely said, "Praise the God of Magic." Chapter 594. The Blessing of the Gods. When Lin Chia opened his eyes again, Yuzuriha had already written a line of text on the paper, presenting it to him. What had originally seemed incomprehensible in Japanese to Lin Chia was now easily understood. "Can you not hear?" Seeing this sentence, Lin Chia was not very surprised. After all, given his previous behavior, it was not strange for the little girl to have such a misunderstanding. Lin Chia nodded. Yuzuriha showed an expression of as expected. She leaned down and wrote something else on the paper, lifting it up. "What is your name?" Lin Chia was momentarily stunned by this question and shook his head. He took the pen from Yuzuriha's hand and wrote a line on the paper. "I don't remember." Although Lin Chia understood Japanese, he was not familiar with names. Rather than awkwardly giving himself a random name, it was better to play dumb, which could avoid further questioning and also make it easier for him to ask some basic questions later. Yuzuriha looked at Lin Chia with a bit more pity in her eyes. Not only deaf, but did he also damage his head when he tried to commit suicide? How pitiful. After hesitating for a moment, she wrote another sentence on the paper, firmly presenting it to Lin Chia. "You also saw that our situation is very bad. I can't even take care of myself and Grandma Tsuru, let alone you. If you really have nowhere to go, you can stay here for one night and you can leave by yourself tomorrow. But after you go out, don't tell anyone you've seen me. I'm still being pursued by the police." Lin Chia raised an eyebrow and wrote, "Why are the police pursuing you?" Yuzuriha was silent for a moment but still wrote, "Because I attempted suicide." Attempted suicide? Is that a crime? Ending one's own life without a divine decree is a serious crime. Didn't you know? Lin Chia was stunned. Divine decree? Suicide is a serious crime? Yuzuriha remembered that Lin Chia had damaged his brain and continued to write on the paper. "By the way, what generation are you? What's your number? If you go to the police station, they can immediately find out your name and family, right?" The look of confusion in Lin Chia's eyes deepened. Seeing Lin Chia's bewilderment, Yuzuriha sighed helplessly, pulled down her collar slightly, and revealed a small string of numbers stamped on her shoulder. 42857494. Everyone is assigned a number at birth by the Pure Land. The first digit is your generation. I am a 4th-generation citizen, Grandma Tsuru is a 2nd-generation citizen, and looking at your age, you should also be a 4th-generation citizen. After reading Yuzuriha's words, Lin Chia frowned slightly. Branding every person with a number? This feels so much like a prison, or perhaps a free-range farm. Lin Chia remembered that in some farms in Daxiao, they would brand their free-range cattle and sheep with numbers to facilitate retrieval if they got lost and to distinguish their livestock from others. But doing this to humans, wouldn't that be a bit excessive? Moreover, how do they ensure that no children are born outside of hospitals? How do they brand all newborns? What if there are any that slip through the cracks? Lin Chia wrote his doubts on the paper. Yuzuriha stared at Lin Chia in surprise for a long time, seemingly astonished. But after a moment she picked up the pen and wrote on the paper. Starting from the 1st-generation citizens, all women entering the maternity period must be brought into the Pure Land to give birth. They can only leave the Pure Land with their child after 2 months. Hospitals absolutely cannot assist in childbirth. What if someone secretly gives birth elsewhere? That's impossible. The numbers on everyone's bodies have biometric detection functions. Once someone enters pregnancy, they will be locked by the Pure Land and forcibly brought in. Starting from the 1st-generation citizens, this has been passed down through generations, so it is absolutely impossible for anyone to avoid the detection of the Pure Land and give birth outside of it. Lin Chia's brow furrowed tightly. What exactly is the Pure Land? Yuzuriha thought for a moment, stood up, walked to the cardboard box, rummaged for a while, and pulled out a rather vintage Tokyo travel guide. She placed the guide on the table, pointed at its cover and said, "This is the Pure Land." Lin Chia focused his gaze and saw that the cover of the travel guide featured a dazzling aerial view of a modern city, and above the clouds over Tokyo, a massive silver disk, Astonishingly large, flickered with a pale blue glow, resembling a super UFO the size of half a city. Lin Chia's eyes were filled with shock. What on earth is this? Is this a product of technology or a force from the mysterious side? You must have been born here too, you just forgot. Yuzuriha held the paper which had this sentence written on it. At this moment Lin Chia was completely frozen in place. It was as if he had thought of something, picked up the pen and quickly wrote something on the paper. Generations, are they arranged by age or lineage? You are a fourth-generation citizen, your mother is a third-generation citizen, Grandma Tsuru is a second-generation citizen, and her previous generation is a first-generation citizen, is that right? Yuzuriha nodded. Of course. How old is Grandma Tsuru this year? She is already 79 years old. Lin Chia's pupils constricted as if he realized something, and his brain began to race. If calculated by normal age, second-generation citizen Grandma Tsuru is now 79 years old. Her parents, the so-called first-generation citizens, if still alive, should be around 100 years old. First-generation citizens appeared over 100 years ago? Over 100 years ago, wasn't that? The mist descends? Lin Chia continued to write on the paper. What about the first-generation citizens? What happened to the previous generation? Yuzuriha looked at him with a strange expression. They are gone. The gods began creation and humanity with the first-generation citizens. Lin Chia was stunned. Gone? How could they be gone? If the gods created the world 100 years ago, then where did Japan 100 years ago come from? In just 100 years, could your technology have developed to this extent? You're not going to tell me that such a modern city was built within 100 years, right? Lin Chia extended his hand, pointing at the dazzling promotional image on the travel guide, where the Tokyo Tower shone brilliantly and mysteriously, the lights of the vehicles on the road leaving trails of light, and in the distance, a passenger plane flickered in and out of view. His expression was serious and solemn. Yuzuriha blinked, picked up the pen and smoothly wrote a sentence on the paper. All of this is a blessing left by the gods. Upon seeing these words, Lin Chia felt as if he had been frozen in place. At this moment only one thought remained in his mind. Something is wrong. This country is very wrong. Chapter 595. What is a cowherd? Suicide, crime, number, pure land, the grace of the divine. These elements, each one of them, do not seem like the result of normal social development. The entire history of Japan has been fractured since 100 years ago, and then these inexplicable things began to emerge one after another. What exactly happened in Japan 100 years ago? What is the Pure Land? Thoughts surged in his mind, and Lin Chia increasingly felt that his first impression of this place was correct. Beneath this tranquil and peaceful exterior, there must be some extremely dangerous secret hidden. Perhaps this is the reason why the future king sent him here? Lin Chia pondered for a long time and finally wrote a sentence on the paper. I want to go out for a walk. Now Lin Chia felt like a lost person shrouded in mist, completely unaware of everything around him. After hearing these things from Yuzuna, he felt an inexplicable urgency in his heart. He wanted to understand what was really going on here. Now he no longer had a language barrier. As long as he acted cautiously, he shouldn't encounter any major problems. Staying in this container wouldn't lead to much progress either, so he wanted to experience this mysterious city for himself. Yuzuna thought for a moment and continued writing on the paper. If you want to leave, of course you can, but do you have a place to go at night? Do you have any money on you? Lin Chia was taken aback. No, don't look at me like that. We don't have any money either and we can't help you with anything. Seeing the hopeful look in Lin Chia's eyes, Yuzuna quickly wrote this sentence, her small face serious, almost crossing her arms and saying, "Damn it." Lin Chia sighed in frustration. It's okay, I'll find a way to get money myself. Thank you for helping me. When Yuzuna saw this sentence, her expression softened a bit. She picked up her pen and wrote 2 characters, but her face suddenly flushed and she didn't continue writing. She murmured softly, actually, with your looks, if you became a host, you'd definitely be very popular and could easily make a lot of money. Lin Chia was taken aback. Confusion arose in his heart. Host? What is that? Is it very profitable? Note it down, maybe he could try it out someday. Of course, Lin Chia pretended not to have heard it. Yuzuna didn't write this down to tell Lin Chia because she instinctively felt it was inappropriate, so she crossed out those 2 characters and rewrote. Since you've made up your mind, then go ahead. Lin Chia stood up from his seat, smiled slightly at Yuzuna and turned to leave. At that moment Grandma Tsuru, who was sitting in a chair, trembled and stood up. Yuzuna immediately stepped forward to support her. "Please wait a moment," Grandma Tsuru said hoarsely. She leaned on the chair and walked to the edge of the container, rummaging for a long time before pulling out a glass bottle tied with a beautiful ribbon. Then she slowly bent down and carefully placed several paper cranes on the ground into the bottle. She handed the bottle filled with paper cranes to Lin Chia, a smile appearing on her wrinkled face. "Guests have come and we haven't been able to take care of you properly. Please accept this small token of our appreciation." Lin Chia stood frozen in place. Yuzuna thought Lin Chia couldn't hear Grandma Tsuru's words, so she quickly picked up her pen and wrote the sentence, showing it to Lin Chia while adding, "Grandma Tsuru used to be a craftsman who folded paper cranes. These cranes could have sold for some money decades ago. Although no one buys them now, it's still a small token of her appreciation. Please accept it." Lin Chia stared at the exquisite paper cranes for a long time, then reached out and took the bottle in his hand. He then politely bowed slightly to Grandma Tsuru. Grandma Tsuru's smile became even brighter. She trembled and bent down lower than Lin Chia, her silver hair cascading down, emitting a faint glow in the dim light. At the same time, Yuzuna beside her also politely bowed to Lin Chia. Under her old black cherry blossom kimono, her frail body almost bent at a right angle as she softly said, "Please take care." Lin Chia had never seen the etiquette of Japanese people sending off guests and felt a bit awkward. After hesitating for a moment, he turned and pushed open the container door, stepping outside. Inside the container, the old woman and the young girl bowed, watching Lin Chia's figure gradually disappear from view. Lin Chia left the desolate area where the container was located and glanced at the neon-lit night sky in the distance. After hesitating for a moment, he walked in the opposite direction. This city was bustling. Even at night, the city center was still filled with lights and revelry, not much different from the modern metropolises of the Great Xia. But Lin Chia didn't want to experience the nightlife of a foreign country right now. He had more important matters to verify. He walked straight along the path he had come, heading toward the sea. After about 20 minutes, he returned to the rocky shallows where he had first been washed ashore. Standing on the shallows, the rolling waves crashed against the shore, making a rustling sound. Lin Chia gazed at the pitch-black sea in the distance, his eyes narrowing slightly. To understand what was going on in this country and where the mist had gone, the most direct way was, of course, to look at the end of the sea. Perhaps he could also find traces of other team members. He gently raised his palm and pointed into the void. A wisp of cloud energy gathered beneath his feet. Cloud of Nimbus. The moment he activated the Forbidden Ruins, Lin Chia suddenly trembled, a sense of unprecedented crisis enveloping his heart. A gaze filled with pressure suddenly descended from the void, landing in this area, as if some mysterious existence in the night sky was gradually awakening, carefully searching for something. Something was looking for him. The moment that gaze appeared, Lin Chia's hair stood on end, and his heart nearly leaped out of his chest. He instinctively stopped the operation of the Forbidden Ruins, and the cloud energy that had just gathered in front of him suddenly dissipated. Whoosh! In the darkness, the waves continued to crash against the shallows. Lin Chia stood there quietly like a statue, completely motionless. As the Forbidden Ruins ceased to operate, the existence in the void seemed to lose its target, carefully scanning the area, passing over Lin Chia's body without detecting anything unusual, and then slowly dissipated. Only after confirming that the gaze had disappeared did Lin Chia dare to move. At this moment his back was already soaked with sweat. He looked up at the dark sky, his expression extremely grave. What was that just now? Previously, Lin Chia had not sensed the existence of that thing until he activated the Forbidden Ruins, and that feeling became unprecedentedly strong. Could it be that the appearance of that thing was related to the Forbidden Ruins? Chapter 596. Mysterious Gaze. Lin Chia stood on the shallow beach for a long time, but he finally made up his mind and raised his palm again. This time he did not use the cloud somersault, but instead employed darkest erosion. A wisp of black light flickered between his palms, coalescing into a sphere about the size of a coin. Lin Chia held this touch of darkness and looked up at the night sky above, his eyes filled with vigilance. After a moment, that terrifying gaze descended once more. Lin Chia felt as if he were being targeted by some deadly beast, the hairs on his body standing on end. Without a moment's hesitation, he dispersed the touch of darkness from his palm again. That gaze lingered in the area for a moment. This time it searched longer than before. If the previous search was merely a cursory glance, now it was a meticulous investigation. It seemed puzzled as to why this aura had appeared here twice in succession. About 2 minutes later, that gaze slowly dissipated, and Lin Chia let out a long sigh of relief. It seemed that the appearance of that gaze was indeed triggered by the forbidden ruins. The reason he attempted a second time was to see if the appearance of that gaze was related to the type of forbidden ruins or the amount of mental energy infused. When he used the cloud somersault for the first time, he infused a large amount of mental energy, but during the second use of darkest erosion, he only minimally activated the forbidden ruins, roughly equivalent to the level of a lamp's realm. He did not expect that even such a weak fluctuation of forbidden ruins could attract that gaze's scrutiny. In other words, it could sense any form of forbidden ruins fluctuation? If it found the source of the forbidden ruins fluctuation, what would happen then? Lin Chia did not know, but he could vaguely guess that it would not be anything good. This was Japan, and the gaze projected from the void likely came from a certain Japanese deity. If it discovered this outsider, it was unlikely to warmly invite him to visit Takamagara, right? But without being able to use the forbidden ruins, he was just an ordinary person with a stronger physique. If he encountered any situation, he could easily fall into a dangerous predicament. The situation had suddenly worsened. Lin Chia furrowed his brow, deep in thought. Eventually, he seemed to think of something and began searching around the shallow beach. 5 minutes later, he returned to his original spot holding a piece of black wood that had been rotted by seawater. He crouched down and began to draw something on the shallow beach with this piece of wood. When he stood up again, a complex black circular magic array had appeared beneath his feet. This was a basic directional summoning magic array. In the past, when Lin Chia used summoning magic, he would directly sketch the magic array in the void with mental energy, which would then instantly take shape. However, this would inevitably alert that mysterious existence, so he changed his approach. He first used the surrounding tools to manually draw the magic array, then infused mental energy in an instant to activate the summoning magic. This way, the process of activating the forbidden ruins would be compressed to the shortest duration, lasting only a moment. Based on the 2 previous experiments, Lin Chia was completely certain that as long as the duration of the forbidden ruins was not long enough, that mysterious existence would not be able to lock onto his specific location. Otherwise, he should have been locked onto long ago. Perhaps this was the only way to evade that existence's perception of the forbidden ruins. After finishing the magic array, Lin Chia took a deep breath and pressed his palm against the massive magic array. His mental energy surged into it. Under the pitch-black night sky, on this deserted seaside shallow beach, a dazzling magical light flashed, illuminating a corner of the sky. At the same time, Lin Chia keenly sensed that the terrifying gaze was once again projected from the void, and this time he could even clearly perceive its angry emotions. Having been drawn here 3 times in a row without finding anything, the pressure contained in its gaze this time was several times greater than before, causing Lin Chia's body to tremble uncontrollably. He gritted his teeth and stood motionless on the shallow beach, forcing himself to control his body with sheer willpower, refusing to be knocked to the ground. Even so, his feet were already deeply embedded in the gravel of the shallow beach. This time, that gaze searched for more than 5 minutes before slowly fading away. The moment that gaze left, Lin Chia felt as if he had lost all his strength, his body swaying dangerously close to collapsing. He could not attempt this again. Lin Chia even suspected that if he attracted it one more time, it might just linger here indefinitely. Even if he wanted to try again, he would have to wait a few days and change locations to give it some time to cool down. Lin Chia regained his composure and walked toward the massive black magic array. In the darkness, he reached out and rummaged through the gravel at the center of the magic array. His eyes lit up. When he pulled his hand out from the gravel, he was now holding a snow-white long knife. White slash. Praise the god of magic, Lin Chia said with a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, genuinely expressing his gratitude. Lin Chia grasped the hilt of the knife and lightly slashed at the void beside him. Instantly, a deep knife mark was carved into the gravel several dozen meters away. Moreover, this time that terrifying gaze did not appear. Could forbidden items be used normally? Lin Chia pondered thoughtfully. In any case, in this mysterious land where he could not use forbidden ruins, he had obtained a trump card for self-protection. Although it was just a knife, behind this knife lay another crucial piece of information. The ability to manually draw magic arrays meant that he could summon those caretakers one after another from the divine mental hospital. How many mysteries were locked away in his hospital? Lin Chia himself could not even count them. These caretakers did not belong to the realm of humanity. To be more specific, they were merely mysterious beings in a soul state. Whether they would attract the gaze of that mysterious existence remained uncertain, but even if they, like him, could not use forbidden ruins, they could still accomplish many things due to their racial talents. For example, a Zhu could transform into a spider to fight and weave webs without using forbidden ruins. Bail Yi could produce purple mist without using forbidden ruins. And Hong Yen could shatter half a mountain peak with sheer physical strength. He could quietly nurture the mysterious in this modern metropolis. Lin Chia temporarily set aside this thought, as he still needed some time to recover before drawing the magic array to summon the caretakers again, and those mysteries had not yet signed contracts. It was still too early for that step. He stepped on the magic array on the ground, wrapped white slash in his trench coat, and walked straight toward the distant city center. He could not walk around the streets holding a knife, so he needed to find a sword bag for white slash. He had heard that Japan was a country that valued sword culture, so finding a sword bag should not be too difficult. But the current problem was, where could he get some money? Chapter 597. The First Invader. 3 minutes after Lin Chia left, a figure in a white robe suddenly appeared out of thin air above the shallow waters. It was a middle-aged man with a solemn expression, a deep red scar running across his brow. His calm eyes scanned the pitch-black shallows, finally resting on the disordered black magic circle below. His left eye suddenly contracted, a barely noticeable white halo rotating within his pupil, locking onto the black pattern on the ground. Analyzing components. Analysis complete. Contains charcoal, salt, sandstone, quartz. No divine traces detected. Weak psychic response detected. Determined to be a remnant left by an intruder who triggered divine wrath. Hazard level analysis in progress. Insufficient known information. Hazard level analysis failed. A series of electronic sounds echoed in the white-robed man's ears, causing his brow to furrow slightly. He opened his mouth and murmured to himself. Another intruder. In the past 2 years there have been several records of outsiders invading, and the landing points are all quite close. How did they manage to evade the watch of the Divine Lord, and where did they come from? He stared at the black pattern for a moment, then raised his head to look at the winding road on the cliff. He snorted coldly, his toes barely touching the ground as he leaped up, floating lightly onto the road. Bring up all surveillance devices on this road, and check for any suspicious individuals within 2 hours before and after the triggering of divine wrath. He spoke calmly. The white halo in his left eye began to rotate again. Searching. At that moment, all electronic surveillance devices along the road connected to his left eye, each segment of footage flashing before his eyes like a rapidly playing movie, his left pupil vibrating rapidly as if searching for something. Minutes later, the images in his eyes suddenly froze. Screenshots appeared in his mind, showing a young man in a black knitted trench coat walking alone along the edge of the mountain road. Due to the dim light, the surveillance could only capture his blurred profile. His figure was captured by some of the road's surveillance, walking from the entrance of the road to a monitoring point not far from the cliff, lingering around the cliff for about 20 minutes before returning the way he came, heading towards the city center. From a timing perspective, it perfectly coincided with the occurrence of divine wrath. I found you, the white-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly. With these few photos he could search the entire Yokohama city's traffic surveillance to trace the intruder's movements. Send these photos to number 4 and have him visit the Purified Land prison to see if he can pry open that guy's mouth. The white halo in his left eye slowly rotated. After speaking, he took a step forward, slowly making his way towards the neon-lit city center. Tokyo. Above the bustling and lively city, a massive disk resembling a flying saucer hovered quietly among the clouds, emitting a misty blue light, like a second blue moon suspended in the sky, filled with a sense of futuristic technology. This place is the birthplace of all infants in Japan, the location recorded in sacred legends where the gods created humanity, the origin of all Japan, a mysterious land symbolizing life and the future. Purified land. At this moment, on the edge of the purified land, a man in a red robe stood before a large floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the city below, which sparkled like crushed gold through the ethereal clouds. Suddenly, a red halo flashed in his left eye, slowly rotating. Another intruder? He frowned, hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked deeper into the purified land. He passed through one high-tech portal after another, eventually arriving at the entrance of a massive, entirely black prison. The red halo in his left eye brightened slightly, and an electronic voice sounded around him. Number 4 Oracle Envoy, identity verification successful. Please proceed. The prison's massive door slowly opened, and the red-robed man calmly walked into the cold, narrow passage. The silver-white walls on either side had a metallic texture, composed of an unknown material, reflecting his figure clearly under the harsh white light. After passing through dozens of deep cells, he reached the innermost part of the prison. In front of a prison door without a number, the red-robed man paused for a moment, seemingly deep in thought, then shifted his left eye to the device beside the door. The red halo spun rapidly 1.5 times before the heavy prison door automatically opened. He stepped inside. In the pitch-black cell there was no light source. Only a few beams of pale light streamed in from the open prison door, casting the shadow of the red-robed man onto the prison wall, slightly distorted, resembling a demon existing within the shadows. In the center of the cell, a figure was tightly bound in mid-air, countless chains coiling around him, emitting an eerie glow. The red-robed man looked at the figure and spoke. How does it feel to be bound by the bone-eating chains? The prisoner's tightly shut eyes trembled slightly, opening a bit, seemingly unable to adapt to the harsh light from outside. He squinted at the white-robed man in front of him, parting his cracked and bleeding lips to rasp. Get lost. Hearing this word, the red-robed man showed no change in expression and continued calmly. You've managed to endure the pain of the bone-eating chains for nearly 2 years, which indeed surprises me. I'm curious, how has your body managed to hold up? The prisoner narrowed his eyes slightly and sneered. What kind of pain is this? The suffering I've endured before is several times worse than this. Truly remarkable willpower, the red-robed man remarked. However, soon you won't have to endure this pain any longer. The prisoner silently watched him. You have 3 months left. Within these 3 months, if you cannot demonstrate your value and submit to the purified land, I will personally declare your divine judgment of death. The red-robed man gazed into his eyes and slowly said, You have only 3 months left. The first foreign intruder from 2 years ago, a Class A wanted criminal. Chao Yuan. In the dim light, Chao Yuan, suspended in midair and pierced by the bone-eating chains, remained utterly calm. Now a way out is laid before you. The red-robed man turned, facing the black wall to the side, the red halo in his left eye swirling, projecting a series of photos onto the wall. 2 hours ago, traces of a suspected 5th foreign intruder were found near Yokohama's coast. We intercepted his photos. Tell me, do you recognize him? Chao Yuan slightly turned his head, his gaze landing on the few blurry photos, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Chapter 598. The Oracle Envoy. A flash of shock crossed his eyes, quickly masked by indifference. I don't know them, he replied flatly. Really don't know? I don't want to repeat myself. His Japanese was somewhat awkward. The man in the red robe turned his head, staring intently at him, and after a moment, projected 3 different photos onto the wall. Every time an outsider invades, I've come to find you, but your answer has always been I don't know. Now I give you one last chance. If you miss this opportunity, the next time we meet will likely be when I read your death sentence. The man in the red robe pointed at the 4 blurry photos on the wall, speaking each word slowly. Do you know them? Chao Yuan's gaze swept over the 4 photos and he calmly continued. I told you I don't know any of them. Very well. A flicker of anger appeared in the eyes of the man in the red robe. He turned off the projection from his left eye and stepped in front of Chao Yuan. I hope you won't regret today's decision. He turned and walked out of the cell, the heavy prison door closing automatically with a dull thud. Bang! In the pitch-black cell, Chow Yuan was locked in midair, his disheveled black hair hanging beside his cheeks. He turned his head, staring blankly at the wall where the photos had just been projected. After a long while, a smile appeared on his cracked lips. You guys can't get caught. Yokohama City. What did you say? On the street, a man in a suit stared at the handsome young man in a trench coat before him, frozen in place. Excuse me, where can I become a host? Lin Chia repeated earnestly. A host. The man looked a bit dazed, scratching his head, still uncertain as he said, there aren't many host clubs around Yokohama. You might have better luck in the West City, but I recommend you go to Shinjuku. Where is Shinjuku? In Tokyo. How do I get there? Of course you take the JR Saikyo line. Thank you. Lin Chia nodded thoughtfully. In fact, he didn't really know what a host was, and fundamentally he didn't need to work at all. His goal was simple: to secretly understand the situation in this country while searching for other team members. Based on Lin Chia's judgment, since they all sank into the sea together, the current's flow trajectories were likely similar, meaning they might have drifted to some place in this country. However, whether it was understanding the situation or finding team members, both required time and money as support. At the very least, he needed to be able to buy a few train tickets instead of walking all over Japan. Under the watch of that mysterious presence, he couldn't use the forbidden ruins, and to avoid raising suspicion from local police or others, it was best to use a reasonable and legal means to earn money. After all, the waters here were too deep and no one knew where the crisis lay, so it was better to be cautious. Since Yuzurina said that being a host made money quickly and was easy for him, he could certainly give it a try. But right now he couldn't even gather enough money for a ticket to Shinjuku, and he hadn't bought the sword bag for Jean Bai, so he needed another way to earn some money. Lin Chia walked onto the bustling street, observing the streets on both sides while pondering. It was already past 9 in the evening, but Yokohama city center was still very lively. The tall buildings on either side sparkled with neon lights, various izakayas and beef hot pot restaurants emitted rich aromas, and high school students ran and played, rushing past Lin Chia and into a convenience store around the corner. Lin Chia stopped at a traffic light, and just then a series of photos began to scroll on the huge screen at the intersection, catching his attention. Criminal. Yama Ryota, wanted at the Shikari level, reward 3 million yen, witness report reward 500,000 yen. Criminal. Hirakawa Takashi, wanted at the Yasha level, reward 100,000 yen, witness report reward 30,000 yen. Criminal. Amamiya Haruki, wanted at the Mogwai level, reward 10 million yen, witness report reward 1 million yen. Bright red warning tape surrounded their electronic photos, with the yellow characters "criminal" written all over the tape, flashing continuously as if marking them with a conspicuous label, illuminating a corner of the black night. Wanted criminals? Yasha, Shikari, Mogwai, what are those? A look of confusion flashed in Lin Chia's heart. When he saw the numbers behind the rewards, a thought crossed his mind to pursue the wanted criminals. But he quickly dismissed that idea. Chasing wanted criminals? Right now he himself was the most wanted outsider in this country. Even if he did catch a criminal and delivered them to the police station, then the police would ask him to register his name and number to claim the reward. Wasn't that just delivering himself to them? Lin Chia shook his head, casting that thought aside, and continued walking forward when the green light turned on. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of a sign at the entrance of a maid cafe, his eyes brightening as he quietly stopped. Perhaps this job could work. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city center, a man in a white robe with a blue halo in his left eye walked out from a dim alley, leisurely making his way to the center of the road where traffic flowed, slightly turning his head to look in Lin Chia's direction. Dingling. A faint sound of wind chimes emanated from him, softly echoing in the bustling street. The once noisy street filled with honking and laughter suddenly fell silent. All vehicles instantly turned off and all pedestrians froze in place. No one dared to honk, no one dared to speak. They turned in fear to look at the figure in the white robe in the middle of the road, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. The man in the white robe didn't even glance at the pedestrians, stepping on the yellow double lines in the center of the road, slowly walking toward the city center. As he passed each vehicle, the drivers and passengers would quickly get out, kneeling respectfully in the middle of the road, their foreheads pressed to the ground. 3 parts respect, 7 parts fear, saying, "Greetings, Oracle Envoy. Greetings, Oracle Envoy. Greetings, Oracle Envoy." Not only the people in the cars but also pedestrians on the nearby sidewalk, customers and waitstaff in the shops, all moved to the sides of the street, kneeling on the ground. This bustling street in Yokohama's city center fell into a deathly silence. As the man in the white robe advanced, everyone lay prostrate on the ground like a mass of ants, not daring to move. To see him was to see a deity,